for my voice, but I have never seen anything like it.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Welcome to the show. It's Television Tuesday. This is one of my favorite days of the week because we get to talk television. And for those of you that are hoping for an episode about, 911 Lone Star or whatever they want to call that show on Fox that we continue to get commercials for during the Super Bowl, we're not doing that here. We're going to talk about the Micheal Vick documentary, the 30 for 30. I know this is where sports and television kind of collide, so this kind of felt like right up my alley to talk about. But before we get into that, I kind of wanted to give a shout-out because it's Tuesday, so we're not super far removed from the Super Bowl halftime show. And I know I talked about it on Monday, talking about how the Shakira and the J-Lo love that we continue to see on Twitter by like 55 to 75-year-old men who barely know how to use the internet, let alone talk about women's bodies. It felt really weird to me, felt kind of gross. I wanted to add on to that because not only was it gross, but also living in the moment is great. And I support anybody who wants to film an entire concert and put it on Snapchat or put it on Instagram story for me to watch. So now I don't have to pay for a ticket to see Billie Eilish at ACL. I support you in that. Continue to do that for me. But at the same time, you need to remember that there are other things that are occurring around the world. There are things that occurred around history. And I saw too many tweets talking about how this is an incredible experience and how this is the greatest halftime show of all time. And while I do think that they started 2020 with a bang, I thought they did the right thing. Patrick Mahomes now is the guy going forward, and Shakira and J-Lo had an incredible performance that I hopefully will set the bar for this decade of Super Bowl halftime performances. I'm not taking anything away from what they did. I thought it was really cool. The mix of Afro-Latino and just native music and just the choreography of the dances was incredible. I was blown away by how organized it is. Every year they have great choreography and everybody is able to move in the same movements, and I can't even fathom how they're able to do that. So every year I'm blown away, but this year especially. But I do want to put an asterisk on it because it's not the best one ever, guys. Come on. Michael Jackson did the halftime show, and it's one of the greatest performances, not halftime Super Bowl halftime performances, not one of the greatest, concerts at a halftime of a game ever. It's one of the greatest performances ever, live performances ever. And Prince, of course, takes the cake. His performance is amazing. Nobody will ever touch that. Nobody will ever touch that. Prince is a one of a kind, a unique talent that we're never getting again. Like, you can argue with your parents about it. You're never going to see Prince again. So I just want to throw that in there before we got into the episode talking about Micheal Vick. It was incredible 30 for 30 first off. We're just jumping in. It's incredible 30 for 30 first off because the Micheal Vick topic is a special one. It's one that has to be handled with care. It's one that you're not going to have somebody coming into the Micheal Vick story talking about Vick with a clean slate because of the time he spent in prison for dogfighting, and it's not alleged because he owned up to it, and he spent the time in prison, and I always believe that we deserve a second chance in America. So I have no qualms with Micheal Vick. But you're not going to get anybody coming in to watch this documentary with a clean slate. Nobody doesn't have a predisposed position on Micheal Vick. Either you have the Sarah McLachlan crowd who think that this guy should be crucified and castrated for what he did with the dogfighting, or you got guys like me and guys that watch sports and football, and I like to think that I am a pretty genuine person, a very genuine person, a very empathetic person, and people make mistakes, and we didn't get it in this episode. We didn't get it in part one of this documentary, but I think we're going to get it in part two where he talks about how he got wrapped up in dogfighting and what happened, and we're going to get into that in a second. But I'm saying is that nobody came into this documentary with a clean slate without a predisposed. So the fact that Stanley Nelson and the rest of the crew over there at ESPN and 30 for 30 were able to make a documentary that showed, I thought, all the sides of Micheal Vick was very impressive to me. If you didn't know who this guy was, he has done incredible work, and I had to look this up because I didn't know what Stanley Nelson was doing. He's one of the most prolific documentary filmmakers of the Black experience in American history. That's what the Undefeated's Alejandro Daniel said, which I will say that is a very good write-up by The Undefeated. I don't always love what The Undefeated puts out. I think sometimes that they are trying to put out content too quickly, trying to make social commentary too quickly, and they need to, kind of take a step back a couple times. But this one was amazing. It was an interview with Stanley Nelson, and Nelson has done topics, and I want to read this before, has done it on Emmett Till and Marvin Gaye, and just a lot of the Freedom Riders. He's done a lot of very good Black experience documentaries. So for him to take the Michael Vick experience too and put it through that lens, I think that adds another level to it. And 30 for 30s, if you've never watched one before, if you don't keep up with the ESPN documentary series that they've been putting out for the last, I want to say 5 years, 10 years now, if you haven't been keeping up with them, they're not only great movie or documentaries, they're great sports documentaries, and that I think is very hard to come by. There's only a handful of them in the world that just production companies that are able to make this and just really show the humanity of sports. I think a lot of people want it to be heroes and villains, and that's not what sports is. That's not what life is. So the 30 for 30s are incredible. But let's talk about the documentary. It starts off with his entire life living in Virginia, which, coming from that kind of East Coast, West Virginia, Virginia area, and having family that has been there for a while, I have a unique sense and a unique experience of that area. And if you've never been in that area before, there are very impoverished areas like any place, but Virginia is special in that way, where there's kind of three distinct areas of Virginia where it's kind of, you can break it up into almost three districts, where there's a very large population of African Americans in one district, there's a very large population of white affluent people in the northern part of Virginia, and that's kind of where the Michael Vick experience kind of crosses over, because he goes to Virginia Tech and he plays football there, and he does it because he was kind of wanted to be closer to home, and you can see that kind of through the entire documentary, where when he gets drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, it's a great experience for him because he's not going across the country to the San Diego Chargers, which we'll get into later as well, the draft process, and because there's a couple cool stories out of that. But what was really cool is that you can see from a young age, you can see Michael Vick's formative years, and you can even see it now, his alliance and his family just being his backbone. The backbone of his personality, the backbone of his character is his family and how tight-knit and connected they are. And I think that you can see that a lot in just the African-American experience. But you also, I think you can see that in great quarterbacks in the NFL. Is that if a quarterback can convince the rest of the guys, the other 52 guys on the team, that it's a family and that they all need to work together to get the job done, to go win games, that is something that you don't see a lot in some quarterbacks. You don't see the ability to lead. And Michael Vick, from watching this documentary, you can tell he's a natural-born leader. That he's not a guy that can just sit back and have players move around him and not have control over the situation. That is something that I remember watching him play football for the Atlanta Falcons, especially for the Philadelphia Eagles, after he got out of prison, where it looked like he had complete control over the game, which you can see peaks of it now in Patrick Mahomes. You can see peaks of it now in Lamar Jackson. You can see peaks of it now in Deshaun Watson. The ability to scramble and get out and the pressure, but not only from like the physical standpoint of being able to move around the pocket, but also be able to look down the field and see what he can do and make plays that might not be there for less talented quarterbacks. But the big part of this documentary that I really liked, and I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I got the stats right, was his coming out party against Florida State. And they talk about the Florida State defense that had 10 future NFL players on it, which, if you think about it, in just a regular college football game that you turn on Saturday, unless you're watching Alabama play LSU or Alabama play Clemson, there's probably not 10 NFL players on the field. If you watch, Wyoming versus Ohio State, you might get 4 future NFL players. The fact that there were 10 on that defense, and the fact that Michael Vick was able to do what he did, 225 yards, 95 yards rushing, and 2 TDs, that says something about the type of athlete Vick was, too. And the documentary does a really good job of not only, I think, putting his numbers in perspective and putting his career in perspective, because there's only so much highlight tape that you can watch of Micheal Vick before you get almost desensitized to it. You almost become numb to it. And I know that's weird to say, but for me at least, showing me him beat up on less talented players, it gets old at some point for me. And to see the numbers, to see the game footage too, not only when he was in high school beating up guys, but in college, and when you put the added fact that there were NFL pros on the team, that says something to me. So then you look at what he was able to do to two players, and this is the best soundbite, and I wish I could play it for you. So there's two Florida State players, two Seminoles, Raymond Simone and Tommy Paulo, who both were expected to be NFL players, both expected to be, some of the better players coming into the draft. And you look at them, and they both tear their ACLs in the game, meaning that Micheal Vick essentially stole the careers of these guys right out from under him. So Pauly actually recovered and was able to play 12 games the next season for FSU, and then they dropped to the second round of the 2001 draft. Where Seymour was never the same. The former freshman All-American was a terror that year as a junior, but opted out of declaring after the Sugar Bowl injury, and he never was drafted, never played in the NFL. And I got that from a article written by Eric Eldahome, for the Yahoo Sports. So I thought that was, I got that story, but I wanted to make sure that I got all the facts right too. The other thing is he comes out and doesn't train or anything for the NFL draft, which I thought was very interesting, because in today's game, if you don't train for the NFL draft, you're kind of shit out of luck. Like, you need to be able to show these NFL scouts that you have everything that they're looking for. And Micheal Vick had all that type of stuff. He knew what the type of quarterback he was. He knew that he was going to be able to play at the next level. All that in the kitchen sink, that he was able to do and just be this incredible athlete. He knew all that. But the fact that he doesn't perform for the scouts, doesn't train very hard to go to the NFL, maybe in retrospect you can look at it and say maybe that was a warning sign for the way that he would treat his career. Because after prison, it's a completely different story. And again, we're going to get into that on February 6th, this coming Thursday, when Part 2 comes out on ESPN. But you look at just the way that he was able to play the game at Virginia Tech, and you got to stop and think that maybe there's a possibility that he is the most talented ACC quarterback maybe ever. And I don't want to put too much into that, but it's just like the fact that he's just such an incredible athlete. And they've made this point a handful of times. I remember hearing this when he was a player. I didn't really buy it, but watching the highlight tapes, you can kind of like put yourself back in the perspective and kind of buy it. The Allen Iverson of the NFL is what a lot of people were calling him. So I really liked it. The last kind of quick story that they had was he was very good friends with Donovan McNabb. He was going to go to Syracuse. He ended up not going to Syracuse. And then he asked Donovan, what should I do after his sophomore season? Should I come back? And McNabb says, no, like, go do what you need to do. Go, like, get to the next level. Like, what is there more for you? And then you get the Incredibles draft day story, which I really enjoy. I really like the NFL draft day stories, how quickly things can change. Either Tom Brady going in the 6th round or Jamarcus Russell being a bust. The NFL draft is so unique in that there's like 100,000 different draft day stories and how they all just change, and how, players who we thought were going to be guys getting picked in the top 5 end up not going at all, or going a lot later. And I just really enjoy those type of stories. But you look at his draft day story where he thought he was going to go to the San Diego Chargers, be the first overall pick, and the Chargers ended up trading out of it, and the Atlanta Falcons end up getting him. And the story writes itself, right? So Part 2 comes out on Thursday. I was very, very excited about part 1. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully that they kind of they're going to get into the dogfighting more in part 2. And now that Andy Reid has a Super Bowl championship, now the inability to win one with Micheal Vick when he was in Philadelphia, hopefully that makes it a little bit easier, more palatable for us Andy Reid fans. We're going to start doing this thing at the end of this podcast where I talk about the shows that I'm watching now currently as well, because I'm rewatching, and I know BoJack Horseman came out too. I have not gotten a chance to see it yet, so maybe we talk about that next Tuesday as well. I'm going to write that down in my notes to catch up on BoJack so that we can break down BoJack Horseman next week. But what I'm watching now currently is I'm rewatching The Boys on Amazon Prime. And it's an interesting take on superheroes and supervillains and how you can make superheroes look like supervillains, and sometimes supervillains actually are the good guys. So in this show, I don't want to give too much away, this young guy, his fiance ends up getting killed by a hero in an accident. So he is kind of not only out seeking revenge, but he's kind of seeking answers for why was he the superhero in this place at this time that ended up taking his girlfriend's life. And as the story goes on, more is revealed that some things are not what they seem in this, fictitious world. So I'm very excited. It was a very good season 1. I'm on episode 3 right now, rewatching it. So once I finish it up, I'm probably going to do just a summary of it. That'll be a podcast on its own at some point, just my review of it. The other thing is too, because we're on the topic of reviews, I had a movie review that got into print at the newspaper. That one will be out on today too. So that newspaper is a weekly, so it came out today on Tuesday. So you can go pick that up if you haven't, if you have a chance, and then it'll be online. So when I do the review of the movie that got put in print, I think it was Marriage Story, is the movie that they put in print this week. When I got done with, when it gets online, I will do that movie review. And I think The Joker is online too. So we're kind of a week and a half back of putting these podcasts out, but I'm going to continue to put them out on Film Fridays. The Gentleman was really good too, so that's going to be a podcast that we're going to do in the future as well. Maybe next week as well too, so we'll find it out. The Oscars are on Sunday, so I'm very excited for that. So February 6th is when the part 2 of this documentary comes out. So we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Remember to cherish the people that you have in your life that you love, because you never know what will happen. That's what the lesson that I think we should learn this past month is that you need to tell the people that you love them while you have them. So I love you guys for continuing to listen and support the podcast. Thank you. Please send it to a bunch of people. I will talk to you guys tomorrow.